恭请大德圣君，为此法会集一切众生，尽转妙法人，教导我们如何了生做事，离苦得乐，速成无生。Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering, attain bliss, and end birth and death, and quickly realize no birth. Namo Sadanto Suche Doye Ola Hadi Sanya Samputosha. 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 Namo Benshi Shija Moni Fo. 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 How about you sit with us?
No, I think it's okay. I'll be fine here.
Oh, you like it here? Okay. I think, Marcus, I'm going to need some paper and a pencil because she forgets herself and she goes on for 5 minutes.
Okay.
I can't remember it all. I'm sorry. Did you two meet?
Oh, no, I'm Richard.
Oh, Richard. Nice to meet you. Jim Fu. She's
yes.
Manager
of
the place.
Yes.
Yes, I'm in retirement.
Oh, yeah. Wow. I read to you about it. No, I'm sorry, I've seen your name. I just
Oh.
haven't.
Are you Hong Kong or?
Hong Kong, yes.
Oh.
那我们今天晚上是准备就是介绍一下上人，因为对很多人来讲，就是从上人入灭之后，其实很多人都没有见过上人，尤其就是最近接触我们道场的人，其实很多人对上人都就是不是很熟悉。那我们想借这个机会来介绍一下上人。
So tonight, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the master. It's okay. It's close enough. Because he left us in 1995, and since that time to now, many of the people who've come into the association, both monastic and lay, never met him. And especially here at Gold Coast and in Australia, many of the people who have come close didn't know him. Did you know him? Say what? Yeah, I said Australia. Okay, Sydney and Gold Coast and Melbourne.
Okay. 但是虽然是说很多人没有见过上人，但是我们也知道，其实会来到我们这个道场，会愿意接触我们法种，其实绝大多数都是因为上人而来的。这样的因缘我们是知道的。
So although many haven't ever met the master in his life this time, still we know that most of the people who come somehow have an affinity that it was really through knowing about him that they came.
那我们也听到很多人来到道场以后来告诉我们说， 他们虽然是从来没有见过上人，
say, although they never saw him, never met him in this life, many of them had dreams about it.
但事实上，上人确实他常常用这个法门来教化众生，就是在上人在的时候也是一样，他常常要教化众生的时候，要教化弟子们的时候，他是透过这个托梦，让弟子们去学习应该要怎么样去突破他们的困境。
Okay, so even when the master was with us, he used this method a lot, where all kinds of beings, and certainly his disciples, he would use dreams, and in the dreams he would teach them about something that they needed to fix or ways in which they could get better.
那今天我们就是用这些照片，然后让大家了解一下上人。那很多人都知道，就是我们很多人会称呼上人是在西方建立三宝的第一人。那当然，如果像对有些人来讲，就是他们做研究的，他们说，其实早在上人之前，其实就有一些所谓的僧人，就是和尚在或者法师在美国了。但是为什么我们说上人是在西方建立三宝的第一人？因为三宝我们讲佛法僧最重要就是这个僧团。确实，上人是第一个在美国建立僧团的一位出家人。
So we often speak of the master. Well, tonight we'll use some pictures and some explanation to talk about him. We often say that the master was the first to set up the triple jewel in America, in Western country. And then people question us and say, well, we know there were monks in the United States and Canada before Shifu came. And that's true. But the triple jewel includes the Sangha. And what the master did that was unique and something he vowed to do was to be able to have the Sangha be native born of the country he was in. So that is, Americans who were born in America became Sangha members.
那上人常常会讲这种话，就是他说：“我愿意做一只小蚊虫、小蚂蚁，走在众生的脚底下，令众生踏在我的身上，从凡夫直达佛地。”那我很多人可能会觉得这种话好像你只是讲讲而已嘛，但是可能对我们一般凡夫来讲，我们可能也可以讲这样的话，但是我们做不到。上人确实是以他自己的身体力行，他是这样做的。
One of the things the master would often say is, just look upon me as if I were a mosquito or an ant. I'm willing to have people walk on me. I'm willing to have people abuse me. And I'm willing to do that from the point of being an ordinary person all the way to being the Buddha. Well, a lot of people could say that, but the master actually did it, and it's not easy to do.
那我想这个就是对要常常接触上人，就以前常常跟在上人身边的人，他们都能够，就是说他们能够有很多很多的证明，就是来叙述这些事情，就是上人怎么样把他自己降到跟最小的众生一样，他愿意牺牲他自己的生命，他愿意怎么样的谦卑，怎么样的卑微的去服务众生。那这些就是不是三言两语我们可以说尽的。
So there are many who were around Shifu, who can prove this, who have actual experience with the master being this way. There are many examples in which he was that way, where he was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the greater good, or for the sake of the person, whatever.
那上人曾经这样子发过一个愿，他说：“我不要有丝毫的自私心。如果我若有一根头发那样细的自私心，甘愿永堕地狱。”上人是这样子公开的讲的。
The master made various kinds of vows, and one of them was about being selfish. He did not want to ever do anything that was self-motivated that would benefit him alone. And so he made the vow that he'd be willing to go to the house if anybody could ever say of him that he had even a hair's worth of selfishness in his motives when he did things.
那我想这句话，我想我们没有一个人能够说得出口。我觉得这绝对不是说他的夸赞自己，而是他真的他亲自能够做到。那我记得我们有一位比丘，他就曾经讲过，他跟着上人很多年的时候，他真的去体会到上人，他说上人真的连一丝头发的自私心都没有。那我当时看到他写的那个文章的时候，他讲到这些的时候，我也是很受感动。
This is an exaggeration for those of us who knew him. It wasn't that he just said this to make himself sound good. It's probably something that very few, if any, people who are now in the world could be able to do. And yet we lived with it. We saw it happen. There was one monk that she spoke with who had been a monk for many years under Shufu. And he had many experiences with this, where the master displayed this kind of unselfishness.
那上人说，所有的众生都是我的家人，宇宙是我的身体，虚空是我的大学，慈悲喜舍是我的功用，我的名字了无形象。所以上人在他自己知道他要入灭之前，他当时留下的遗言就说：你们不要给我做任何的纪念堂、纪念塔，你就是把我的骨灰烧了以后，就抛到那个虚空里面。那当时弟子们确实也照了上人的遗言这样讲，因为上人就是说，我就是虚空，那我要回到虚空去。
So the master said, all beings are my family, the universe is my body, all of space is my university, kindness, compassion, joy, and giving are my functions. When he knew he was about to leave us, he gave instructions and said, don't set up stupas for me, don't name some hall for me, don't do any of that, because I came from empty space and I will go back to empty space and I don't want to leave any traces.
那上人是诞生在东北吉林省的双城县，这个是以前上人的出生的时候，那个是就是东北吉林省双城县，现在已经改了，对，现在是黑龙江省那个拉林镇，是算吉林省的吉林省拉林镇。我知道他现在已经改了，就是这是早期的一个地方的名称是双城县，现在是改成吉林省的拉林镇。那他是西元就是1918年，就是农历3月16日他出生。
Okay, so when the master was born, he was born in Manchuria, and at that time the place was called Twin Cities. She says now the county's name has changed to Black Dragon, that's the river that runs through, and that it's Jilin village probably now. He was born in 1918 on the 16th day of the 3rd month.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
那上人是他曾经讲过说，他从小，他在讲他小时候的故事的时候，在他11岁之前的事情，他很少提。他会跟弟子们提到的，就是说他为什么会这一生他会出家做一个出家人，就是因为11岁的时候，他突然之间就是他们在他们家乡的那个乡下的郊外看到一个死去的婴儿。那因为他以前从来没有看过死去的婴儿，他当时不明白这是什么，他当时很奇怪，就问人家这是什么的，这是什么啊？ 有人告诉他这个孩子死去了。那他当时就充满了疑惑，他说什么叫做死啊？回家就问他的母亲。当时刚好他们有一个亲戚是一个修道人，这样就是对修道很有他的经验，就告诉他说，如果你人都会死，但是呢，如果你透过修行，你能够修道，就可能不死。所以这个种子从此就种在他的脑海里。
So the master doesn't talk much about his life before 11 years old. But at 11, something happened. He was out in the fields with other kids, and they came upon a dead child, which was and probably is the custom, that the child is just wrapped up and put out on the ground. And he didn't know death, so he didn't know the child was dead. And it took a while for him to realize that his friends had to tell him that the child was dead, and he didn't know what death was. So he went home and asked his mother, and she explained death. And then he said, well, how can you not die? And he said, then there was a relative, right? Not a monk, just a relative. A relative in the house who said, well, it's possible not to die. Everybody dies, but it's possible not to die if you cultivate.
Mm-hmm. 然后他12岁的时候，他那个时候开始就，我们讲就好像那个小孩子突然间开窍了，他开始忏悔到他从小到12岁的时候，他觉得他给父母亲带来很多的困扰，因为他的个性很刚强，那很喜欢哭这样，那他就开始就跟父母亲叩头，然后最后不止叩父母亲，他也觉得他也应该给一些天下的大善人叩头。然后也应该给一些恶人叩头，因为希望恶人能够改过向善。然后也最后也说，包括所有的那些一切的众生啊，包括所有的蚂蚁、蚊子什么，他说他觉得所有的众生他都应该为跟他们叩头。所以后来一天最多叩到835个头，要大概2个半小时以上。
Okay, so when he was 12, you could say he had an awakening. He realized that for the early part of his life, he'd been not such a great kid. He was stubborn. If he didn't get his way, he cried a lot, gave his parents a lot of grief. And he realized that, and so he decided that he should now start bowing to his parents. So that's what he did every day. But then that didn't seem enough, and he began to bow to all the good people in the world. And then he began to bow to all the bad people in the world, hoping they'd get better. And he went on to bow to all kinds of sentient beings, even down to the ants and the mosquitoes. And he ended up making 835 bows a day, although there's speculation that it was double that. Yeah. But he did it in the morning and in the evening.
那上人非常的孝顺，所以在当时他们的家乡已经大家都知道了，就是人家称他为白孝子。
The master was very filial, and so he was known in the village and the area, and they called him Filial Son Bai. That was his surname.
那19岁的时候，他等到他母亲往生之后才出家，因为他之前想要出家的时候，他母亲就跟他说：“你可不可以等到我往生之后你再出家？”那上人就守了他这个诺言。19岁母亲往生之后，他就守孝，在母亲的坟墓旁边守孝了3年。那后来他就到三原寺，就在长治老和尚座下剃度出家。那受戒以后就在那边守孝3年。那我们曾经去到就是去到上人的故乡，我在3年前，在2-3年前以前去。那是那个上人当时就是守孝的地方，这个母亲的墓，其实现在都找不到了，现在都是变成一片农田。不过拉林镇现在其实还是改变没有很大，还是一个蛮就是很贫穷的一个乡下。
when the master was 19, his mother passed away. And prior to his being 19, once he did the death experience, he wanted to become a monk. And she talked it over with him and said, that's okay, but could you wait until I'm gone? So then she fell ill and died when he was 19. And he did two things at that point. He went to Three Conditions Monastery and had his head shaved. He became a novice monk. And the other thing he did was then go to live in a hut by his mother's grave for 3 years. So he stayed 3 years to observe filial piety after his mother passed away. Jinfu Shi went there last year looking for where the mother's grave was and couldn't find it. It's in a field somewhere. But the little village very close to where he was, called Lalin, is still a backward little village. There hasn't been much progress there.
那上人在守孝的时候，他就开始就是日中一时，然后都夜不倒单，就是坐在坟旁边，结了一个小小的茅棚。所以如果你们对上人就是那个时候的一些，他那时候发生很多很多不可思议的故事，如果有兴趣的话，你可能就是要看看上人的事迹，那上面讲得很清楚。
Okay, at that time when he observed filial piety for 3 years, he began to sit and never lie down. He was meditating, of course, during the day. And he also began to take only 1 meal a day. And he had a little small hut that got built that he used, a little A-frame, to keep out the weather. And many, many very extraordinary things happened during the time of the 3 years of filial practice. So if you're interested in those, we won't go into those details tonight, but there are available Chinese and English versions of Shifu's biography that talk about the things that happened.
然后到了1948年的时候，上人就是决定就是要去参访这个虚云老和尚，因为那时候他已经知道上人虚云老和尚的一些事情，他很仰慕这位出家人，所以他就从东北就沿着那个从黑龙江下来天津，然后上海，然后他就是火车坐轮船，然后到了广州这样。那时候他见到虚云老和尚的时候，虚云老和尚为上人做了印证，就说如是如是，就是这样。
In 1918, the master decided he wanted to go meet in person Venerable Master Hsuan, who had a reputation in China, and he very much venerated him from afar. So he traveled from Manchuria through Tianjin and on down to Shanghai, taking whatever route he could, and finally into Canton province where Venerable Master Hsuan was. And when the old monk saw the master, he gave the classic comment, which is, yes, that's the way it is. Yes, that's the way it is.
然后1949年的时候，他就叩别虚老，就到香港，因为那时候有人请了上人去香港。但是当时上人有讲过这个事情，他要去的时候，其实虚云老和尚有阻止他，希望他不要去，因为虚云老和尚跟他说，如果你这一去，恐怕就没有办法再回来。可是因为上人那时候身体有一些好像有一些毛病，他想去找医生治疗，然后上人还是很坚决的要去，所以后来上人去了以后，就因为政治的关系，他果然就不能再回去。所以他讲到这件事情的时候，他自己觉得是一个很大的遗憾。
Okay, in 1919, he say what?
49.
I'm sorry.
1949.
1949, he left Venerable Master Hsuan. He was at Nanhua Monastery, Southern Flower Monastery in Canton Province, close to Hong Kong. And the master traveled to Hong Kong. But before he did that, the elder master, Hsuan, urged him not to go, wanted him to stay, and said, I'm afraid if you go, you won't be able to come back. But the master had some physical difficulties and he finally needed to go to Hong Kong. So he went, and it was true. He never could come back and see their Master Hsuan again, and so he's always felt regret for that. Okay.
那你现在看到这个就是训老上给上人的这个法脉的一个证书。那这个证书是1956年，那时候上人已经在香港了，那训老上就寄到香港给他。那这个就是你可以看到正法眼藏那个佛祖源流讲的，这里面有他们的这个法脉的这些流程，然后就是给上人，就是让他接这个维养中的第9代的释法人，然后赐给他名字叫宣化。所以就是从那时候开始，我们就用了，我们才会知道现在我们上人都叫宣化上人。所以在之前他都是用渡轮，那就是因为训老上给他赐了这个法名之后，就开始用宣化。
Okay, so then what you see on the screen now is the certificate that Venerable Master Hsuan completed and gave to the master. It was mailed to Hong Kong so that the master received it there. And in there is the line of transmission of the Weiyang school of meditation. And Shifu is named as the 9th patriarch of that school and given the name Shenhua. So that's when his name began. And before that, he was known as Dulun.
那这个照片是上人在西乐园寺的大门那边拍的。西乐园寺如果现在你去香港已经找不到，因为那块土地被上人被那个政府征收了，因为他们要开辟道路，所以现在已经找不到西乐园。
This is Western Bliss Garden. Shifu standing in the main door. He built it. And you won't find it if you go there now because the government repossessed it in order to build roads.
所以你看到这个门帘的下面，上人还是用四渡人，在那个时候他还是用这个名字。那西乐园是上人在香港的第一个道场。四渡人。Left.
Where?
这里。你们是 left side 的形。
Oh, I see. Okay. So he wrote the couplet on the door couplet on the two sides of the door, which speaks about the name and the function of that monastery. And he signed it as Shi, which is the Shaking clan name we use, and then Dulun. So he was still using Dulun, even though he received the transmission, he was still using Dulun in Hong Kong.
那这个照片是在香港的另外一个道场叫佛教讲坛，现在还有，这是一个就是上人的弟子他捐给上人的，那个地方你如果去你就知道非常的小，可能就差不多跟这个 Marx 的家差不多大，他们的布达佛。
Yeah. So this is another place that the master received in Hong Kong. It's called the Buddhist Lecture Hall. It's at Palmadi, and you can see the races down below. It's on the dingwall, the top floor. And at that time, there was a donor who managed to give this to the master. It's a very, very small place, about the size of this room.
但是有人去了我们金岸法界的时候说，我们所有的道场最小的就是金岸法界。
Sure enough. But she says then people went from the Buddhist lecture hall to our little Buddha hall in Gold Coast and said it was the smallest one.
但是金岸法界就是佛殿很小，但是我们地方蛮大，一共有32 acre， 所以不是很小。
So although the Buddha Hall is small at Gold Coast, we have 32 acres and several buildings, so it's still plenty roomy for us.
那你看到这个照片，就是另外一个慈心寺，现在还有，就是在山上，在大屿山山上。那现在就是慈心寺就是南众的道场，佛教讲堂是女众的道场。那你看到这个旁边这个龙，这个在慈心寺的那个他的这个寮房上面，上人当时就是请人家在那边就是塑了一条龙。那这是有故事的。
And so the third place that he had in Hong Kong is on Lonto Island, still exists. It's called Hsuan. And this is the dragon. The Shifu commissioned someone to actually make this dragon. The dragon is also there and very visible when you come up to the monastery. And there's a story connected with it.
对，那这张照片就是我们可以讲是历史性的照片，就是在1962年，就是因缘成熟了，那上人就到美国，他开始准备就是在那边弘扬佛法。但是你知道，上人去的时候，他是自己一个人，他其实身上根本没有钱，那只是因为那时候就是有一些香港的弟子，他们先到了美国，当他们到了旧金山以后，他们觉得没有佛法可以听，因为他们那些弟子都已经皈依上人，然后他们习惯说，以前在香港接触上人的时候，还可以亲近出家人。到那个旧金山的时候，他们觉得都没有办法，也没有寺庙可以去，也没有僧人可以接近，他们就写信给上人说，希望上人能够到美国来，就寄了机票给上人，上人就这样一个人就到了美国，就是在1962年的时候。
Okay, so this is what you call a historical photo. It's 1962, and the master's getting off the plane the first time he came to the United States. And the way this happened was he had young disciples in Hong Kong who later went to the States to go to school or whatever. And they were disappointed because when they got to San Francisco, they couldn't find a monastery, couldn't find a place to study Buddhism or worship Buddhism. And so they wrote to him and said, there isn't any place. Could you come? He came alone.
那上人刚到美国，其实他很辛苦，他有6年的时间，其实那时候也没有什么人供养，也没有什么人知道他，就几个弟子。然后他那时候根本常常上人说他常常是自己必须要到那个Chinatown那些卖菜的人，他们那个垃圾桶里面去捡一些就是还可以用的菜，就是吃那些东西。然后他住在一个地下室里面，完全没有窗子，你知道，整天是就是像那个，所以他那个时候给自己取名叫做墓中僧，就像在坟墓里面的僧人。6年之久，等于你也可以讲，就是那个6年有点像就在闭关，或者是说就是他自己在自修的一个事情。等到他6年期满之后，他出来了，那就在1968年就是上人开始讲这个内严经讲修班，然后当时这张照片是为当时的那些学生受菩萨戒，释法师就是其中的一个。你知道释法师是哪一个吗？对，看谁能指得出来。你不要指，让他们指。
Bottom row with hair. Bottom row on the right hand side behind the gray-haired lady. Is that? Nope, other side. Other side. Come all the way across.
This is me.
Yes, that's not me. The one down below. Oh. That's me. No, beside
right.
Yeah, that one. And the one that you pointed to with the black hair, she's the other one who left home with me. So the five of us went. She was the other one.
She's still here?
She later went back to lay life, became an attorney in Ukiah, stayed close to the city of 10,000 Buddhas. She's finished that now and retired.
Again?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's her.
Where's Molly and Dharma?
They aren't there yet.
No?
No,
Oh, I thought that might.
they aren't there yet, but Dr. Epstein is. He's standing beside Triple with the glasses on.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And it's amazing because he came with a full bushy beard. You know, those were the days of the flower children and all of that. And looks like he shaved his beard for the Bodhisattva precepts. So, okay, so she said it was very difficult when the master came to the United States. Didn't have donors. He would often go to the vegetable markets at the end of the day and get whatever leftover vegetables there were. He was put up for a while in a basement that had no windows, just high windows in a basement like that. And so he wrote a poem about himself during that time, called himself The Old Monk in the Grave. And he did that for approximately 6 years. He was in semi-seclusion during that time. But then in 1968, he came out and he explained the whole Sharanama Sutra. And this picture shows us at the end of the Sharanama Sutra, he transmitted the Bodhisattva precepts to us. And that's the culmination of having gotten the Bodhisattva precepts. So that was all of us who, at that time, graduated.
那当然最适合讲这段历史的就是这法师，他是唯一大概仅剩的，就是这照片里面唯一到现在还是一位出家人。然后那个时候你想想看是多么不可思议，上人一个人从中国来，从香港来，他也不会讲英文，那旁边全部是西方弟子，那西方弟子没有一个人懂中文，他就靠着好像只靠着一位在家居士。用的那种半生不熟的，懂得半生不熟的中文来帮他解释。
There were some people who knew Chinese. So Dr. Epstein was one of them, and he's still with us. I'm sorry, he's here. He's here. But this man was also a translator. So this one, and this woman. There was one woman and 4 men who translated for us. So these two, and let me see if I can see who the other translators were. This guy was a translator, and there's one more, but I can't seem to see it now. Okay, so there were 5. And you'll see that this monk has already become a novice monk at the end of the Sharanama. He was our number 1 when the 5 of us went to Taiwan. This man had his 5 eyes open, his spiritual eyes. His wife had his 5 eyes open, her 5 eyes open, and the kid, 12 years old, had his 5 eyes open. So he was a very unusual man. He used to call it Talons. He'd go to work and he'd call Chip and say, "You better go check on such and such as a disciple. They're doing such and such."
Is this in the mission or is this in Chinatown?
It's in Chinatown.
This one's the Golden Mountain.
No, it's the Buddhist lecture hall, and it was the Tianho Temple, which was a Taoist temple. And so Shifu made a little image. What do you call that? Not paper mache, but anyway, a little white image made out of something. And he put this Buddha image, Pastor Paris, thank you, put it in front of all this Taoist paraphernalia. There were these, weapons and all the Taoists back there, and that's where we were. So you'll see behind, and by this time we had the Buddhists, but behind that, all that fancy stuff is Taoist. All the stuff up on the wall.
Right.
And it was the oldest Taoist temple in San Francisco, so it was tourist attractions and all the tourist books.
Yeah.
So during our time, they would come out and be quite surprised to see us studying Buddhism there. It's still there, and it's only a block away from our present Gold Mountain. You walk up from Sacramento, and you go down Waverly Place.
Okay.
And so ours is here at Grant and Sacramento. You go up here, you go down Waverly Place, and it's about a block down.
Oh, yes.
And it's still open because it's still a Taoist temple.
It's on the map.
You can go see
It's on the tourist maps.
Yeah, it's on all the tourist maps.
The man is still around?
He has a funny story. He stayed around, but he couldn't give up the wife And the master said of him, if he had become a monastic this life, he was really sent for Shifu. He would have been able to help Shifu a lot because his eyes were already open. But he didn't. And eventually, Shifu sent him to Mount Shasta. You know where Mount Shasta is? It's in Northern California. And it's a perpetually snow-covered mountain. And he sent him there, which is what he often did in China when he met somebody who was had a lot of spiritual power or potential, but was naughty. He'd send him off to a mountain, and that's what he did with him.
And after that, nothing was said of him anymore.
No, not from us. I'm sure we rather kept in contact with Shifu. Okay, so her comment was that obviously it wasn't easy because these are all Westerners. And so when he lectured the Shurangama, he was lecturing to Westerners. So he really needed those translators. And even so, it was very difficult.
那上人在讲这个《楞严经》的90天里面，上人为了要成就这些学生，因为他们是30几个人从西雅图就坐着飞机，然后呢，
坐破烂烂的去，怎么坐飞机？
坐长途那种巴士来的。哎，我一直以为是坐飞机。
No, driving cars, old cars, broken down.
那很多人就是抛家弃子去了那个旧金山，像司法师就是去了以后就不回家了。
So that session was 90 days about, and we all managed to get through it. And there were about 30 students who came, or young people who came from Seattle. And joined it, and most of them stayed. Sometimes they left and others came, but the majority stayed through the whole thing.
如果要知道那些故事，有机会你们可以看看我们法总出版的有3本那个上人的追思专辑很大本，里面有很多他们早期这些弟子们的回忆的一些故事，非常的精彩。
So if you want to know, the Chinese has published 3 volumes of Shifu's, it was called In Memoriam when he left, and it's Chinese and English, and there's lots of stories. All the early disciples wrote what was most meaningful to them, and so that's all in those 3 publications. So if you want to know more, you can read those.
那事实上就是像我自己在看到那3本追思专辑的时候，我自己的体会是，你要真的去了解上人的境界，你必须要去看这3本追思专辑，因为上人为了度化这些弟子们，在早期的这些弟子们，因为他们跟佛教来讲的话，就是西方人他们接触佛教的因缘没有像中国人啊，或者是亚洲人，他们已经都有一些根基了，所以上人为了度化他们。可以讲，上人把18般武艺都全部都用出来了。
I say, she says, that if you really want to understand the master, you really ought to read those memorial volumes. There are 3 big volumes that came out within a year or so that after the master left, and people put a lot of work into them. And they're very galactic. Anybody who wanted to put something in, it got to go in. So it's a big story that tells. Shifu from many people's personal perspectives. And you have to realize that most of us, certainly that group, and many others who came to him early, they had no contact whatsoever with Buddhism. Not like in Asian culture where it's sort of in your language and in your culture. We didn't have it. And so you can imagine it wasn't at all easy for Shifu to be able to communicate with us and bring us along.
然后在1968年，就是有5位，就是当时就是5位美国的这些大学生，他们就决定出家了。那上人就是因为这样子的一个，他们5个人出家，就是 说4人成众，他们以5人就已经变成一个僧团了，所以等于是上人是在西方建立三宝的第一人，就是这样。
Okay, then in 1968, 5 university students went to take precepts. You couldn't take precepts. You couldn't receive precepts in the United States because there weren't enough monastics of the right level of precept age to give it to it. So we had to go to Taiwan to do it. And so he sent, this is a picture of him sending us off to Taiwan to go to a monastery and receive full ordination. And in the Vinaya, in the discipline of Sangha, 5 is considered to be a Sangha, a group. And so the 5 of us went, and therefore when we came back as fully ordained, the Master had established Buddhism in that country using American-born natives as the Sangha. So now the Sangha was native.
那事实上，这1968年这五位大学生申请出家，上人其实很久以前，在他19岁在母亲的坟墓旁边守孝的时候，他已经有了他已经写下了这个记录，就是将来会发生的事情。
I told you I didn't want you to bring that up. Okay, so actually when Shiva was 19, he was by his mother's grave. He knew about us, and he wrote a prophetic verse which had all our names in it. We each had 2 names he gave us. So
那上人那时候就是他们这个照片看到，就是他们。
I'm over there. Actually, the picture has me in it, and they cut me out. I never felt good about that. I'm over there beside those 2 young men. Anyway, I am one of them.
然后你可以看到上人就是在每天就是教他们写中文，一天教他们24个字，然后他们每天必须要去练习，然后那些笔画，上人就用那个不要的那个报纸啊，在报纸后面写那些用毛笔写字，他们就学上人怎么写，一天24个字，所以很快他们几位就学习了中文，都也能够写，也能够讲。
So this is a picture of a class, and he had many classes with us. This is actually the Buddhist lecture hall, the Taoist place, and the table takes up almost the whole room. So we had our lunch there, we had our classes there, and we also had our lectures there, and around the walls were the meditation benches. So we meditated around the walls, and if we had to bow, we bowed between the table and the meditation benches, and it was quite a tight squeeze. One of the lessons he gave was every evening he would he would write 24 characters from the Sharanama Sutra. And some of us worked, so we'd come back from work and about 5:30, he'd come out of his room and write for us. We didn't write, we watched. Every night we watched him write 24 characters. And without having practiced writing, we knew how to write within a year because we always knew the stroke order. The stroke order was always the same, and we watched, and it went in. And so to this day, I don't know if he writes the stroke orders like everybody else does, but I know how to write his stroke orders.
那你看到黑板上的是那个上人就是在讲那个水镜回天路，所以你看那个水镜回天路，就是那个是上人自己写的。
So the I don't know, 水镜回天路, I don't know what they're calling it in English. Something like water and mirror reflections or something. Anyway, it's a book Shifu wrote. And so what you see up there is a short lesson. We get a short lesson like that. And this was his book. He was giving it to us lesson by lesson. Oops. What have you done? Broken.
这张照片你看到是他们最早成立的君山盛世，就是你看它非常非常的简陋，应该不是现在的君山盛世吧？是吧？这是第二个吧
This is the first one, but it's not Gold Mountain Sage Tree Monastery. It's Gold Mountain Chun Monastery. And they always say it wrong, and I always say, and they never listen. So.
君山禅寺
Yeah. So it was an old mattress factory, and we purchased it, and first had to take out all the mattress stuffings, and then renovate it. And this was the Buddha hall.
那看他们早期在讲这些上人的故事的时候，他们讲上人怎么节俭，人家不要的，外面不要的那些木头啊，每一块他们都捡回来，一小片木头都不能丢的。他们就是上人是真正的就是以他的身教来教化弟子，让他们知道就是这个一分一毫的东西都不可以浪费。
One of the things you see in this picture is, we don't need that, but just do this, is thrift that the master was teaching us because we were from an affluent country and probably all spoiled. So he was teaching us about thrift and recycling and using. So everything that happened in this monastery mostly came through extraordinary donations. You know, some office building decided they were going to renovate, and we got all the wood from the office building for free, things like that. And then he would make sure that we used that wood properly, and anything that was left restored. He was very, very thorough in teaching us about thrift.
那这张照片是在讲说70年代的初期的时候，上人座下的僧团就是越来越多。你现在在照片里面看到的就已经是有12位出家人。
So this is 2 ordinations. No, second ordination, the monks had to go to Taiwan again. And the third ordination, finally, we decided to use out of the Vinaya if you don't have enough people in your barbaric country, because of course America is a barbaric country, right? Then you could use fewer qualified monks. And so that's the route we took. So we have 12 people there now, some of whom received ordination at this monastery, at the first Gold Mountain Monastery in America. Maggie, you don't like our pictures?
那这张就是1976年的时候，当时上人就买下了这个万佛城。如果你们大概就是有看过关于法种的一些介绍，对万佛城怎么样来的这个故事，应该都略有所知。就是当时最早的时候，这个是美国加州的一个精神病院，最多的人的时候可以容纳到2-3万人，就是在这个方圆之内。因为那个建筑物一共70几栋建筑物，是属于美国加州政府的一个精神病院，最多的时候有2-3万人在里面。但是很奇妙的，经过他们使用多年之后，慢慢的就没有水了，就再也找不到水了，没有水源，所以被迫的就是美国加州政府就放弃了这个精神病院。那这个精神病院就整个荒废了很多年，就一直荒废在那个地方。
So the picture says 1976, and our celebration was 1976. We actually purchased it in 1974 and began living with it in 1975, but the official date is 1976. And it was a mental hospital. There are 2, exactly like. There's another Wangpo-cheng in Los Angeles. I mean, it's not a Wangpo-cheng, but it's the same setup, same building. So they had 2. And the story goes, and they could house 20 to 30,000 patients because there were approximately 70 buildings on the grounds where they lived. The story she's telling is that eventually the water gave out, and they had to let it go. I will add to that story and say, when Reagan became governor, they did some changes in mental health because of things that were happening in mental health. And whereas before this place had been run largely by the patients themselves, the patients, there's a huge laundry building, and they would be the ones to do the laundry for the facility. They were the cooks, they were the gardeners, they were the landscapers, they were all those things. When this changed and a new kind of experiment was done with medical approval, they began to get pacified. And once they had this kind of medication, which is heavy if you know anybody who uses it, they can no longer do those things. And so, yes, the water ran out. But as well, the whole place suddenly, where he'd been self-supporting and viable, was no longer viable.
那这个荒废很多年，其实这中间有很多人一直很想买这块土地，因为这块土地非常的大。那时候建筑物还非常的好，因为是在美国经济最好的时候盖的建筑物，都非常的坚固。如果现在你们有机会去万佛城，你就知道那些建筑物多么坚固，那个墙壁有多么的厚，那个以前的砖头多么的厚。然后可是就是都是因为没有水源，所以让很多人被迫都只好放弃。到最后是我们比丘们他们建议上人说去买这块土地，那上人就先派他们去看，他们看了以后很喜欢嘛，然后就跟上人讲。那上人买了这块土地以后，就请人家来勘测那个水源。那当时那勘测水源的那个工程师啊，还跟上人讲说，他说我劝你放弃，因为我们以前勘测过，这里是没有水源的，我劝你放弃好了。
Okay, so it then became vacant because it could no longer be used by the government for mental institutions. And it was vacant for a long time. And it was prime land, it was huge. And people wanted to buy it. But when they looked into it, they found out there was no water. And so eventually the monks, Shuka would send us out, disciples, monks or nuns, looking for property. And so the monks that were on this assignment found this place and said, I think this is it. So then the master went to see it and negotiated to purchase it. But checked out the water, and those who came to talk to him about the water said, we've already been here, we've already looked, there isn't any water. You better not buy it.
但是上人就是这样子，带着那个勘测的人员走了以后，他自己用他的手杖，就是在一个地方，他就敲了几下，他说：“你就在这个地方挖。”然后就是像我们所知道的，就是那个人当然本来不相信，可是上人坚持说：“你在这边挖，你可以挖得到水。”就挖了一阵子以后，真的有水。到现在也从来没有听过万佛城没有水过。
Okay, so he was advised not to, but the master walked around the property then and beat his staff in a certain place and said, try there, I think you'll find water. And people didn't believe it, but they went ahead and tried it, and indeed there was water, and there's still water, there's always been water since then. It's fjords coming out of Clear Lake, which is one of the deepest lakes in the world. And so there are these deep underground rivers, and that's what Sherpa tapped into. We now have 2 wells, and both have sufficient water.
那从那时候开始，就是等于正式上人就在从有万佛城开始，就开始有慢慢的很多的弟子们来，然后也很多的从亚洲地区的也开始去造访这个万佛城。那从那时候开始，上人就逐渐的就在美国很多地方建立了分支道场。到目前为止，我们整个法种在整个世界的分支道场大概有差不多30个左右。
Okay, so once the city of 10,000 Buddhas was purchased, then of course things began to grow, and disciples came, and around that time, in 1990, really, the Asian disciples began to come in. There's lots of stories about that too, and why they didn't come sooner. But then things began to grow, and the master began to set up branch monasteries in lots of places. So to today we have 30 branch monasteries, more or less, in lots of different countries and locations. Maggie, too much today. Yeah.
那你现在看到照片里面，就是一个是加州的那个伯克莱，一个是在 Sacramento 的法界圣城。
So in the pictures on the left, we see Berkeley. That's where Reverend Hsuan is. It's more than 100, must be about 120-year-old church. And then the one in Sacramento was a resort. So it's about 14 acres with 250 cow farm, 250 rooms with bath and so forth.
那左边的这个是洛杉矶的金轮盛世，这个是第二个金轮盛世，之前他们有另外一个。
Oh, 6.
真的，翻得这么 OK。那这个西雅图的金凤盛世，其实到现在还是在那里。当然，这是第二个。
Okay, so Goldwheel Monastery, this is probably the 6th one. Because that's where we started, and that's where Reverend Hsuan bowed from, and that was in the 1977 or something. And we had lots of donors down there and people who knew real estate, so we'd go from this one to a little bit bigger one to a little bit bigger one to a little bit bigger one. And then this one is in Pasadena, but we also have others in Los Angeles. And the one on the right is Gold Summit. It looks down on the Puget Sound and across to the Olympic Mountains. It's quite a nice location.
那这个是左边那个是福禄寿，右边是长体盛世。
Okay, so the one on the right, it used to be a Catholic convent, and they were very cloistered. And when they decided to move, then we purchased it. And it's right across from the water. It's on Ocean Boulevard, so you walk across the street, and that's the ocean. The other one, go back one. Blessings, Prosperity, and Longevity is also in Long Beach, and it's about 30 blocks in from the ocean, very close to Long Beach.
是的，这个就是在三藩市中国城那个新山盛世，那右边这个是金盛世，是在3号山。
Okay, so this gold mountain is the second gold mountain, not the one you saw earlier, and this one is at the corner of Grant and Sacramento, smack dab in the middle of Chinatown. And we own the Bank of America underneath. That's part of the building, but it has something like a 35-year lease. And that came up, and we negotiated and let them keep that, and we are upstairs from that. Gold Sage is in San Jose, and it's way up on the hill. It used to be a school, and it's about 10 acres, some 12 acres.
这个是在东部，我们东部就是这一座的这个分支道场叫华严精舍，就是在所谓的玛丽兰。
This used to be a post office. And so what I'm trying to say to you is every one of our buildings is recycled. We've never built a building. So this was an old post office, and it has a school across the street. And it's all sort of like this area, all trees and very nice and quiet. So that's in Maryland, very close to Washington, D.C.
那加拿大现在我们有2个道场，一个就是在卡加利的怀严盛世，一个是在温哥华的金佛盛世。
Okay, so the left-hand one, Albatomska Monastery, right across from that door is the Bow River, which runs through Calgary, and so it's also beautiful. It's a place where Everybody likes to walk and where the birds come, and it's quite nice. And so it's in the middle of Calvary. But we also have not a building, but actually, yes, we have 3 houses up in Golden, which is in the Rocky Mountains, and we have 1,000 acres there. It's really paradise. The 3 there came up, they decided they would keep it for the monastery. So this monastery goes up to the Golden, to the middle of the Rocky Mountains, and in that building they hold sessions like Amitabha and so forth. That place up in Golden is the mouth of the Columbia River, and the water runs like milk. Shiva used to tell us that in the sutras in the old days that the water in this land, in this world, was milky because of the minerals and so forth, the nourishment in it, nutrients. Well, that's what it is at the Columbia River. It takes a while for it to come down and turn clear.
那这个是在台湾，台湾现在有几个道场，一个就是花莲叫做弥陀圣寺，然后还有在六龟的叫法界圣寺。
Okay, Liugui on the right-hand side, that's the men's monastery. And on the left-hand side is a monastery that we've now moved out of because we bought much land right next door to it, a huge place. And so the monastery is moving to that place. And this one is a little bit dangerous because the drop-off right in front of the monastery is very steep, and we did have one nun hurt herself pretty badly there, so they decided they would move. So they now aren't in that monastery.
Oh, 那这是在台北，就是法界佛教印经会，已经有大概20几年的历史了。
This is the book distribution in Taipei. It started out as lay people setting up a little bookshop somewhere in somebody's home, actually. And these really, really vigorous elderly people who were Sherpa's disciples, ladies, would come, and they would get the books, and they would get on buses, and they would bus all over Taiwan and pass out these books to people. So when the master came, everybody had heard of him because they'd done all this footwork. Later, when I was in Taiwan at the Buddhist Academy, we began to go from Hualien, where the Buddhist Academy was, up to here. And the lay people really were ready to turn it over to monastics at that time. So somewhere in there, between 1990 and the time the master passed, it became very solidly handled by the nuns. And to this day, it still is. And it's grown. They now have the 11th floor in full, and the 6th floor, and I think the 9th floor. And plus they're at the top, so they also have the roof. So it's quite expensive. They have school and many things happening there.
那现在这个是马来西亚，马来西亚现在有好几个分支道场。这个你看到的是登彼岸，就是在吉隆坡的最热闹的一个地区的地方。那登彼岸他们已经整个重建了，非常非常的壮观。
Called Gold Triangle. How do you say that in Chinese?
哪里？
It's in the Golden Triangle in KL. It's the best financial district and so forth.
金三角。
And so it got renovated. It was over 100-year-old monastery given to us, and it took a bit to be able to renovate it because it was almost like historic building by that time, but it did get renovated. And that's the male monastery, although the nuns from another place in KL go all the time to help. And so there it is. You can see it in the Golden Triangle.
那好像这个莲花金色所听说没有，
好像没有。
那个这个右边这个紫云洞观音寺，他们现在因为也是非常老旧的一个建筑，他们现在已经整个拆掉，要重盖。
No, well, they may be doing that, but they moved to Hsuan Dharma Conditions Monastery, which just got built. So for the nuns who lived here for many years, moved to Hsuan, which isn't far away. Maggie. It's not Maggie, it's Clara.
起来。
Oh dear.
我们现在听上人的录音带，常常上人在讲法的时候，旁边也都有很多婴儿的哭声，就是也是那时候当时的弟子们，他们就带着他们自己的孩子到佛教讲堂或者到金山寺，所以我们现在听录音带里面，这个声音非常的熟悉，都是孩子的哭闹声。
So we hear the Sherpa's tapes and we hear that sound all the time because we were all young then and people brought their children. Sherpa welcomed them 100%. Sometimes you have to talk pretty loud, but he really was happy to have the kids.
那这个是上人讲经说法的照片。上人他发的愿就是他说我的愿力是只要有一口气在就要讲经说法。所以上人是一直坚守他这样的愿力，就是不管在哪里，几乎讲经的课是都没有停的。那我很佩服赤法师有一点，就是他到了金岸法界，虽然我们人很少，他也是一直坚持，就是像我们经常就是一直晚上都有讲经。啊，有的时候真的是只有2个人、3个人，可是我们也是都没有停。
So this left top is Sherpa at the Buddhist Lecture Hall in Hong Kong. And I think this bottom one is probably in Taiwan. And over here on the right is our City of 10,000 Buddhist Buddha Hall before much was ever done. None of the Buddhas are in there. It used to be a gymnasium and a stage play place. So that's where Guan Yin sat. Sherpa's vow was that as long as he had any breath left, he would speak the Dharma. And indeed, that's what he did. All of his life he spoke, once a day, sometimes 2, even 3 times a day. And we who followed him, he wanted us to speak. And now that we do, I realize how difficult that was for him. Because he was also doing so many other things, because we, as Westerners, didn't really understand how to be protectors, how to be attendants, and so forth. So he had a lot to do. But indeed, he spoke all the time. And Jing Fusher says we try at Gold Coast Dharma to have a live lecture every night so that we try to continue that tradition as best we can.
这张照片是上人在1985年回到中国去，在访问上海玉佛寺的照片。
是真的吗？
应该是真的吧，因为这旁边就是玉佛寺的那个时候的住持叫做。
I didn't know he ever went back openly. I knew he went back secretly, because there was fear he would become a guoba and wouldn't be allowed to leave the country. You know, he'd be under house arrest because he was so famous. So I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, so that's Jade Buddha Monastery, which is in Shanghai, and so this picture says that's him in Jade Buddha Monastery. That monk came to the United States, but apparently this picture was taken when he was in the other monastery. And I'm surprised. I didn't know that he went back openly. Jade Buddha Monastery. Jade Buddha Monastery. My aunt, who's not Buddhist, went to China. She was quite a character, and she went to China to teach English as a second language back way long time ago. And among the things that after she passed away that my nephew found was pictures of Jade Buddha Monastery, which he sent to me because she visited Jade Buddha Monastery. How's that for a connection?
OK， 那这是照片，是1988年上人在马来西亚讲法的照片。
Okay, this is 1988. Shufu went on many delegations, and this one was to Malaysia, and this is him speaking in Malaysia.
哦，这是1990年上人应邀率团到欧洲各国去访问，那应该也是上人第一次就是率这个弘法团去欧洲。
So this is actually in England, and the monk sitting beside Shufu is the very well-known Theravada monk Sumedho, who was actually an American but went to be a Thai forest monk under Ajahn Chah. And then Ajahn Chah sent him to England because there were more Thai supporters in England at that time than there were in America, I guess, or else he wouldn't have come back to America. So he set up Chithurst, which is a very flourishing Theravada monastery, and that's what Shufu visited, and he went on to several of the European countries after that.
哦，那这个照片是1993年的上人在台北弘法的照片，你看到照片里面是几万人在那个体育馆里面，那这也是上人最后一次到台湾。
So this is in 1993, the last time the master was able to go to Taiwan, and there were tens of thousands in that hall. Most of those you see in black robes were about to take refuge with him.
那上人那一次去的时候，我人也在场，那个画面是非常感人的，就是因为那时候上人已经病得非常的重，他那时候已经有在洗肾，那你看到他的脸什么，其实就是都黑的。他当时要进这个体育馆里面的时候，他根本走不动，所以当时是很多的那些义工，他们就是把他放在那个他坐在那个椅子上，他们把他抬进来这样。他当时进来的时候，全场很多大家都哭了。
I couldn't talk about the master for many years after he left. It was almost a decade before I could do what I'm doing tonight. Just couldn't do it. That's why I asked her to do it in case I ran out of. In 1985, I'm sorry, 1993. When he went, he was. She's going to be a singer, I think. When he went, he was so ill that he could not walk in this assembly. Jim Fusher was there as a layperson then, or already a novice.
No,
Layperson. And his hair already had kidney failure, so he was 2% kidney function, and so he was on dialysis, and so his face was dark, and it was not at all easy for him to do what he did. So he was carried in by the volunteers on that day, and there was hardly a dry eye in the place.
所以那时候印象中耳边全部都是哭声，因为你看到那个画面，你看到他病得那么重，然后他还是为法忘去弘法，其实就是前后左右都在哭，我就听到一片哭声就对了。
It was very moving because obviously it was difficult for him to do what he did, even to travel to Taiwan at that time. And so she said all around her she could hear people crying. Actually, after the master lost his kidney function, there were 45 disciples who volunteered to give him a kidney. We wouldn't take it for many of us. And we begged and we pleaded and we talked all kinds of reason. Look at us and look at you. One kidney for many of us, and we're still going to go on living. One kidney to you, and look what you can do for so many people. And he said, I will never harm one hair on the body of any of my disciples, and he wouldn't take it.
哦，那这个就是上人的心愿之一，就是翻译经典，因为他从那个 19岁那时候，他在母亲坟墓旁边守孝的时候，他决定当一个出家人的时候，他自己立下的志愿就是说，因为当时他在中国那时候已经接触了很多的宗教，那他就感觉就是说，为什么像基督教啊那些天主教能够在整个世界都那么的，就是那么的兴盛，就是因为他们翻译成各国的语言。那佛教这么好的教义，为什么不能够广为流传？就是因为没有翻译，所以他当时已经立下志愿，就是说他要把这个佛法传到西方，那也要做翻译经典的工作。那事实上，这个也是上人这一生他非常非常注重的一个部分。
Okay, so this was another major vow. One of the vows we heard about was to establish a native Sangha in America, and we saw he did that. The other vow, another vow, was about translation. When he was at his mother's grave, he did a lot of thinking about where his life would go. He also had visitors and visions that helped him know what his life was going to be like. And he made vows considering it. And one of the things he thought about during that time was why so many religions were able to flourish throughout the world, and why Buddhism wasn't known. And he brought it down to the Catholics, the Christians, and so forth, had a very rigorous program of translation, so that the stories and texts got into the languages of the people. And Buddhism didn't have that. It wasn't done. Once it was translated from Sanskrit into Chinese, but once it got to China, it didn't leave. And so one of his vows was, I want to see that change. I want to see the sutras be able to come out and go to other places in the world. So this is the Translation Institute. It's a beautiful place. It was donated by Shen Jiajun, who is a shipping magnate and a very sincere Buddhist. And at the back, this is the front door. Out the back, you can see Golden Gate Bridge just a little ways away. So it was a beautiful location. This was the opening of it. And I'm right beside those two little children down there, kneeling.
那上人他这一生，他出家之后，他的3大志愿，有一个就是翻译经典，有一个就是教育。有一个就是建立正法的僧团，这是3大愿力。
Oh, but if Reverend Hunter.
Sorry, that was in Pacific Heights, is it?
Yes.
Oh, right, sorry.
You ever see that?
The Golden Gate Bridge. No, I didn't.
Yes, it was in Pacific Heights.
Right.
Indeed it was.
Okay. Wow.
What happened was, we were at Gold Mountain, and then I guess Master probably figured out it was time for the women and the men to separate. We lived on the 2nd floor, and the men lived on the 3rd floor. And so he rabble-roused, I think, among the monks. When I look back on it, that's what happened. And so they kicked us out. Unfortunately, he had a little apartment just out the way, so we could walk from Gold Mountain to this apartment. We had to live in this apartment for a while, and it wasn't at all like living in a monastery. And we were feeling very neglected and figured that this was an entirely macho situation, and that women had no, and then this came along and we got it. So we were in Pacific Heights with a view of Golden Gate Bridge and this mansion.
那这个不是现在的 ITI， 对不对？这个已经不是了。
No, this was later. This helped buy the city of 10,000 Buddhists. That's what happened.
然后事实上，上人这个愿意也真的在他这一生里面，他真的也去实现了。就是到目前为止，你去看哦，在所有的各个宗教的团体，我们这个法种翻译的经典，用翻译出来的经典是最多的。所以其实很多的道场，他们如果需要经典，他们事实上要从我们这边来索取他们所需要的一些书。
So I forgot to translate. She said there were 3 major vows. If Reverend Hung Shu were here, he'd correct you and say there were 4. The 3 major vows were translation, education, and Sangha. And Reverend Hung Shu would say, and multi-faith. Okay? So she says of these 3 that he really did manage to fulfill them, or at least give them a good push before he left us. and we're speaking about translation. Probably our association to date has translated the most classical texts out of Chinese into English, and the commentaries that go with them. And we enjoy a good reputation with our translations. And so she says, first of all, other people don't do it. And second of all, ours are good, so people come to us. Many monasteries will ask us for our translations, and we always are giving them. But the other thing I want to mention is we're totally volunteer. We don't pay anybody anything to date. In other words, the layout, the graphics, except the publisher, the printing house, we pay. But all of the translation and all the steps it goes through and all of the layout and preparation are done by volunteers.
那这些就是你看到，就是我们除了翻译成那个英文之外，已经有100多种，另外还有法文啊、西班牙文、越南文。那目前这几种语言里面，除了英文是最多以外，我想现在越南文可能的超越了其他的语文。
I think this is outdated too. It's more like 250 or 300. So we publish Chinese books, loyally following the text and putting in Sherpa's commentary in Chinese. So there are a lot of those. But then we also translate, and that's part of the Buddhist Text Translation Society, the whole Chinese body of language. And then French, Spanish, Vietnamese. There's a little Japanese.
我跟你这很少，大概2本吧。
And probably Vietnamese, they're very vigorous in translating. They're translating predominantly from English, our English, into Vietnamese, though some of them do Chinese and do it that way. So they probably now have the biggest body besides the English and Chinese.
这个照片就是上人在万佛城创立这个月亮小学跟培德中学。那事实上这个经过这个几十年，这些小学，这个月亮小学跟培德中学，事实上已经见出它的成效，学生出来的素质都非常高，他们后来到美国申请大学都申请到非常好的大学。
So this is early days of our schools. This is a graduation from the high school. So the city has everything from preschool through elementary, through high school, through vocational training for Buddhist lay people and Buddhist monastics, and then university. And when kids graduate from our schools, they go on to the best schools in the United States, MIT, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Stanford, big name schools, and they do very well. It's now 8:35. Do we stop? Do we go until 9? What are we doing? Are there questions?
Yeah, we have questions.
You have questions.
So, I can find them.
Do you want to wrap up with some of these pictures, or?
大概还有几张我们要看，现在这几张看得到嘛？一共50张。那这张照片就是团结宗教，就是1987年那个中国那时候上人邀请了中国啊、台湾啊近百名的僧人举行水陆空大法会。
So this was a very special event, and the master managed. China wasn't so open then, but managed to bring in 100 monks and also 22 friends and relatives into the United States to the city of 10,000 Buddhas, and they conducted the water, land, and air repentance to help cross over beings that had died in those ways.
那这个团结宗教。那团结宗教就是上人这一生也是一直致力于这个。他说各个宗教之间是要和平的，然后要互相去支持的。 他一直说要打破这个各个宗教间的这种成见，这种门户之见。
So this is strictly in a Christian setting. And as I said, Reverend Hsuan talks about multi-faith, where the master was very interested in trying to break down barriers that existed among religions and even within Buddhism. And so he worked very hard at that.
那这个是上人当时要求弟子们，就是一定要就是在每个分支道场，每一年都要有这个就是敬老节，就是要发扬这个敬老的敬老尊贤的这种精神。
This is one of the holidays that he set up that we do every year, which is to honor the elderly. Usually in the United States, it'd be in the fall, usually in September, October. We just had one, and the newspaper article was wonderful, and it said it had been 20 years at the city that we've been doing this. So we invite all the local elderly to come in. Often we help give transportation and all those things. And then the young people serve them and make it a happy day for them.
这些都是敬老尊贤，就是当时敬老节的一些活动。还有每一年，就是上人也要求是必须有，从1992年开始，上人就说每一年也要有一天是怀少节，就是对一些我们对那个对下一代，我们要关心他们。
So the other holidays in the spring with the youth, and so we have Cherishing Youth Day. We do this every year, and we find ways in all our branches and at the city to let the youth show us their talents and also to encourage them.
这个是就是这一张照片，就是当时1993年的时候，当时都没办法走，那义工们就把他抬上楼去，就是这样。
So this is the one we saw in China in 1993. The master was carried it.
那这个就是最后上人入涅之后，然后他的骨灰就土比之后，然后那几位比丘他们就把他用热气球送到虚空，然后把它放到虚空去。所以这个就是上人讲的，我从虚空来回到虚空去。
This was at the master's after the master's cremation. This is City of 10,000 Buddhas. Actually, the place is right across from the dining hall, that area. The balloon took some of the monks up, and then they scattered Sherpa's ashes over that area as per his wishes. Oh, and it says, I came from empty space and I'm already turned empty space. So that was, don't make me any memorials. Just let me go.
Okay.那有一个人问题，就是说我们念咒的时候是必须要念在心里面呢，还是要念出声？那我们是必须要坐着去念呢，还是我们也可以在我们睡觉以前，在睡觉的时候去念？其实这个都是没有一定的，就是不需要有这种执着，因为。但是你说你念咒要大声或小声，就是看你当时的情况。如果你一个人在你的佛堂，你要怎么大声，不会干扰到别人，当然没有问题。那如果你今天是在大众里面，或者你正在上班，或者可是你很想持咒，因为有些人是持咒已经持到，就随时他的咒都在他的脉里面。那这样的话，当然你那个时候就要是用心念，或者是如果说你在不干扰别人的情况，你可以用金刚念。金刚念就是你含在嘴里，然后只是听得到微微的声音，但是持续都有在念咒，那个也是一种方法。
Okay, so the question is something like, when you recite mantra, do you do it in your mind or do you do it out loud? Do you do it sitting, or is it possible also to do it, I assume, reclining before you go to sleep? Her answer was, none of these are really fixed. You just use your common sense. If you're alone in your own hall and you want to recite as loud as you want, you won't bother anybody, then it's fine. If you're with others and you might disturb people with your recitation, then you should do it in your mind. There is another way to recite. It's called Vajra recitation, where you're actually using your breath, which has to do then with meditation as well as with mantra. You're using your breath to say the mantra very almost like a whisper, but the breath is involved. And that's called Vajra holding. And that's another way you can do it, and you probably don't bother people if you do it that way. Marcus, can you make the screen say? Oh, there you are.
I was just about
Oh, you're just gonna turn it off? Okay.
no, I actually have a video. I was thinking
Oh.
publish that. Just one master live. That's
哇，你这边有一个问题，他说地址
He wants to share your video.
哦，OK，是
This is Junfu put together this video with some lay people in Canada. And one of our nuns helped set it up.
“上人在美国最早期的弟子回忆说，上人一生中一举一动，无不是在阐述佛陀的教法。另一位弟子这么说上人，日常生活中他的一言一行，在在都在阐述佛经中佛所说的佛法不是幻想，不是神话，不是想象的戏论。它让我们知道佛经中所说的法都是活生生的、真实的，而且在我们的生活中是可行的，是切合实际的。”
It's really Master Luke at the City of 10,000 Birds.
一位弟子说：“我不止一次，而是许多次。”听说上人在路上拔野草，光着手清洗厕所，行人所不愿行。身为妙义正家生，化成灵月法道龙，度以四六传心印，轮旋无休记古轮。这是维养宗第8代德清虚云老和尚写给上人的表信记。他把维养宗第9代传给了上人。上人虽迈成维养禅宗，但其持戒之严谨态度，皆是弟子们所深知的。在上人出至美国弘法时，为了让西方弟子们了解佛教三藏，延请数位高僧大德陆续给弟子们开讲戒律学。上人曾为了鼓励弟子们学戒，每次清早4、5点，他老人家就陪着弟子们赶着3个小时的车程，由万佛圣城到三赶市去听其他的法师讲戒。每次讲解时，上人常在后面跪着听，弟子们也在前面一起跪着听，这就是上人的身教。上人虽然不特别的为弟子们开一门戒学课，但是在讲解任何的经典乃至开示时，上人无时不在说明戒律的内涵以及重要性。上人尤其特别声明，凡是跟他出家者都必须要严守佛制，日中一时，袈裟不离身。所以无论外界如何的批评，甚至排斥、诋毁，上人也绝不因此而改变这种家风。对于这些流言蜚语，上人只是说，这不是我定的， 这是佛制，我们要遵守佛制。
You have more question?
呀，有一个人问他说他在念楞严咒或者大悲咒，他都是念楞严咒或者大悲咒打坐的，有的时候念到空无一念的，然后会有妄想或者昏沉，然后自己才发觉。请问如何快速冲破这一关呢？
You read it, you answered. Okay, so it's something like this person, when they meditate, they sit in meditation, they meditate, and they reach the point where everything is empty and there isn't any thought, but then the false thoughts come up, and how can they get through the gate of the false thoughts?
我的回答是不怕念起，只怕觉迟。所以他现在其实他自己已经有觉了，这个就是一个很好的现象。他觉到他的妄想，他的昏沉，就是这样慢慢下去，他自己就会有一个光复了。
So her answer is, you need to go. Her answer is that it's not a matter of you only need to worry about not recognizing something like this. You have already seen that you have this difficulty, and so that means you'll probably be able to find a way to solve it. Is that right? Good enough?
然后还有一个人说，他们很想学楞严经，可不可以请知法师利用网络，然后讲楞严经，让他们能够学习？
So the question is, they want to study the Shambhala Sutra. Is that sure or sure?
You.
Okay. Could the monastics do it on the over the internet, right? The university at the city, actually in California, at Berkeley and the city, is about to go for a further accreditation, and part of the program for accreditation is to set up new ways of study. And so I believe that probably very soon classes will be held online. So it's possible, since Shangama is one of the things that we like to talk about, that there will be chances for that. 你可以翻译，如果他是中国人，是美国人，是学中文，是
学中文。听我在看，你让我听完是吧？
哦，他不注意啊，那我是地方。我在啊，这个你翻译嘛？
你有听到吗？
啊，我说王宝强的那个跟 Berkeley 的那个法学大学现在要更进一步一样，所以他的功课都改了，那大概也会有一些机会啊，在网络就可以学一些课。那我们现在是很喜欢讲楞严经，所以可能将来会有机会听。
OK。其他的问题我用 email 回答他们。
We're late.
Okay.
You don't have to go to work.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is Sunday.
Tomorrow's Sunday. People don't have to go to work.
Okay.
Do any of you have anything you want to say? Clara, would you like to say something? She knows her name. You have such a strong voice. Would you like to add your voice to our little meeting? I believe you.
有没有什么问题？
Okay, so we can transfer there.
No further questions.
Okay, no further questions.
我们现在做回向。愿以是功德庄严佛净土，上报四重恩，舍己三途苦。若有见闻者，悉发菩提心，尽此一报身，同生极乐国。
这